a lot of the language that describes just the area in Ithaca, like the gorges, the way the water runs, you know what I mean? And like I said, growing up, where we were dispossessed in Canada, I could not really make the connection with this language because I couldn't see it. You know what I mean? It really didn't match. And I was like, hey, we live in this flat piece of land up here. So all of these great adjectives that I learned growing up for these, different beautiful ravines and different types of rocks, it didn't match until I came here.
You're listening to Speaking of Language, a podcast recorded at the Language Resource Center at Cornell University. Each week, we explore a topic related to language pedagogy and second language acquisition. This week on Speaking of Language,
Steve Henhawk shares his mission to maintain and proliferate the language and culture of the Cayuga, or Gayogo, the indigenous people who first inhabited the land on which Cornell University now sits.
Welcome to a new episode of Speaking of Language. I'm Angelica Kramer, the director of the Language Resource Center at Cornell University.
And I'm Sam Lupowitz, the LRC's media manager. We are delighted to speak with Steve Henhawk today. Steve is a visiting lecturer in Cayuga, one of the languages Cornell started offering last year.
Welcome to Speaking of Language, Steve.
Yeah, no. Hello. Happy to be here.
So this is the first time in Cornell's history that students can take a class to learn the language of the Cayuga Nation, whose traditional territory is now home to Cornell's Ithaca campus. The launch of this class coincided with the United Nations Declaration of 2019 as the Year of Indigenous Languages. And we are so very lucky that you, a Cayuga speaker and historian, are teaching this class. Can you share with us a little bit more about your background, your experience with languages, and how this all came about?
Myself, I was, we're talking Cayuga language. It's a highly endangered language, so I was fortunate to I was raised, I guess, in Canada. After the dispossession of the land here in the late 1700s, that's where a lot of the Cayuga members ended up, was being in Canada in Six Nations Reserve. So I was submersed in the language. I was raised by my grandparents. I kind of got to see the real good part of the language, and I got to see the really low side of it. So I kind of lived through it. So and right now, that's what we're really trying to do is it's all revitalization to try and get our language back, and it's all to do with the people coming back to the area, moving back to the Cayuga Lake area. So it's a work in progress, but I'm really happy that Cornell has kind of stepped up to the plate. You know what I mean? Like we'll talk about it being 150 years too late after. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It took them a little while too, but you know what I mean. And that's what a lot of things is. My whole thing, what I try to do is education, whether it be through the university or any sort of outreach that I like to do, and like opportunities like this as well, to speak to people and get it out there, and just to let people know that we are. My biggest thing is I don't want us to be a history lesson, because we're so long the Gayogo people. That's what we seem we're a history lesson. You know what I mean? And that's what I'm really trying to change that so that we're not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So then, as the expert in Cayuga and the Cayuga culture at Cornell, what are your goals and what are you hoping to bring to the table through your classes?
Well, I guess with the class, the introduction, what I've started last year and this year, I think that because I only get students for one semester at a time, and the language is so in depth and intricate that I'm not expecting to get fluency out of students. But what I really am expecting is to open their eyes to it and to explore other possibilities. That's why, like with Cornell, there's always going to be a progression. And so, last year, we started it, and it was received rather well.
Yeah.
This year, the classes, we had to expand it, you know what I mean? Because we had so much interest in it.
That's great.
Yeah. What I'm expecting is I'd like to keep it growing. That's the expectations of it. To keep it growing and expanding, and I think it's really going to do it itself, because when you start to work on language, that's kind of how it happens. It just builds, you know what I mean? It just builds and it gains momentum. And I think that's what's happening right now with the whole project, as the way I see it.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Can you talk a little bit more about how you integrate some of the resources in the area on campus? I know that you take your students to the Cornell Botanic Gardens, for example. What are some of the connections there between like language and nature and the land?
I've been fortunate, like Cornell, they let me plant. I plant some of the native seeds that, like I guess the real Cayuga seeds, the Gayogo seeds, that heirloom seeds that we've been able to keep in our family for over 200 years since the dispossession, actually. So we bring those back, and that's one way I keep the connection. But just being in the geographical area, just being here, we can, like, a lot of our language is deeply connected to the geographics of the area. Mm-hmm. So like we have so much description. So like a lot of the language that describes just the area in Ithaca, and like the gorges, the way the water runs, you know what I mean? Like how the side of the hill and everything like that. So, and like I said, growing up hearing that language, because I lived in a where we were dispossessed in Canada, I could not really make the connection with this language because I couldn't see it. You know what I mean? It really didn't match. And I was like, hey, we live in this flat piece of land up here in Canada. You know what I mean? It's really flat and there's really nothing. So all of these great adjectives that I learned growing up for these, different beautiful ravines and different types of rocks and stuff, it didn't match until I came here. And being right in Ithaca here, now I can see what they were talking about.
How big is the community of Cayuga speakers in the area here in Ithaca or in upstate New York?
Actually, 6 years ago when I came to New York from Canada, there was no speakers here on the New York side portion, and I was the only one. I was here by myself, so I started a program that was initiated up in Seneca Falls there with a group of Cayuga Gayogo people that had moved back to the area prior to that, and they wanted to revitalize culture and language. So I started working with them, and I was really successful. I like to, think I was really successful at that. Where I'm at now, like I have 5 speakers over here that are, I'm going to say maybe mid-level fluency, but that's taken, I think, 6 years to get them to that point. So, and I think we're in a really good place to make have the language grow, because we like to work with a lot of younger people as well. Like the 5 I'm talking about, that's all adults, right? So what I really want to see is it to be taught to younger people, so that they got that much more time to like with any language, it needs to develop, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I want to try to get it to younger people, so that the language does have that time to develop over years, right? So that it can develop and grow is really what I'm looking for it to do.
Well, and hopefully we can also grow the entire program so that eventually this will be, part of the language requirement, and that it's not just this one-off course, but that it's actually a sequence, right? So that anyone who's interested can continue and actually gain fluency.
Yes. Yeah. That's my end game. You know what I mean? Is to really make sure we have something kind of put in the stone. So that, because where this is, it would make no better sense for it to be in this area.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Because this is where the language originated.
Yeah.
We talked about that a fair amount last year, I believe, when we worked together. I was asked to help record you recounting some of the history of the Gayogo people and your journey and what's brought you back here to teach. Is there any more you can comment about that sense of place and what that brings to the language and the culture, and what it means to you to be able to offer that language and the history and culture attached to it back here?
Oh yeah, like I spoke of earlier, like different things where, like I said, growing up being displaced, like I couldn't make the connection, you know what I mean, to a lot of things. But now being back here after a period of time, like I said, it's not only like the geographics. It goes even deeper than that. Like geographics is one thing, but to see the way the weather changes here, the way the mist rolls off the lake, it's subtle things. But the subtlety in that is what makes our language alive, and it's really what brings our people to the existence here, because being displaced and then once we come back, there has to be this connection. And like I said, a lot of that connection was broke through loss of language, through loss of culture, things like that. Just being kind of forced into American society or whether it be Canadian society. But once we come back here, a lot of the things, like I said, the subtlety of just the area, and that's really what makes us who we are, and that connection. So that's why, recognition needs to be given to Cornell itself and so many other organizations in the area that have been so welcoming to the Gayogo people, and for this allowed to happen.
Yeah, very important. And I mean, as you said, definitely overdue.
Right.
So if our listeners are interested in learning Cayuga or learning more about it, are there some resources that you can recommend, obviously, other than enrolling in your class?
Right. That would probably be your best bet right there. So like I said, on the community that's here in the Ithaca, Romulus, right up to Seneca Falls area, there's seems to be Gayogo people that's all kind of dotted along the lake now. So like I said, I know Cornell, they have some things available that's online, but really soon what's going to be up, there's going to be a website that's up. I think it's called the Friends of the Gayogo. For people that don't know Gayogo, that's Cayuga. Cayuga is the name that's been imposed on us. What we refer to ourselves as is Gayogo. And hopefully within time, in this area or wherever, we can kind of get rid of the whole Cayuga bit, and we can go back to our original name, which is Gayogo. So that's what we're trying to do. But there's going to be a webpage up, and that's what it's called, the Friends of the Gayogo. And we're going to try and direct a lot of traffic to that, so that people can be aware and updated on things that may happen. And I want to do a little language bit on there as well,
cool,
for people within the area, so that they can come on and get a little bit there.
Yeah, wonderful. That's great.
Right.
Fantastic. Well, it's great to speak with you about this, Steve. Before we sign off, we would like to ask you to share your favorite word in a language you speak, love, or are learning. So what is that word?
Oh, my favorite word, man. That's a tough one. Well, I think lately, I think because like I said, it changes all the time. But right now, what I've been thinking about, like with the changing of the weather and, with everything, because everything we get is from the land here. So, and everything I refer to, everything I talk about is to do with the land and our connection to it. So, ONZ, in our language, ONZ, and what that is, it's like the beautiful land or the beautiful earth. And when I look around and here at the area, that's what comes to my mind all the time. So, ONZ, that would be, right now, that's my favorite word for the next little while.
That's beautiful. I like that. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for speaking of language with us, Steve.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you for providing the area and the space for the Gayogo to be welcomed back. Yeah, man. Thank you.
Next week, David Foreman joins us on our podcast.
David is a visiting lecturer in Yiddish, another one of the languages Cornell started offering last year.
Until then,
Auf Wiederhören!
The Language Resource Center is located on the ground floor of Stimson Hall on Cornell's main campus in Ithaca, New York. Check us out on the web at lrc.cornell.edu or look for Cornell LRC on Facebook and Twitter.
Speaking of Language is produced by Angelica Kramer and Sam Lupowitz.
recorded by Sam Lupowitz.
Original music by Sam Lupowitz, Dan Gable, and Joe Gibson.
Thanks also to the College of Arts and Sciences at Cornell University.
As a reminder, the ideas and opinions expressed on this podcast do not reflect those of the College of Arts and Sciences or any other official entity of Cornell University.
We thank our listeners, and do stay tuned for our next episode.